Good evening. Oh, there she goes. Good evening. I'd like to start by thanking Josh for that wonderful introduction and the Lincoln Douglas Society for hosting tonight's debate. It seems everyone has been introduced at this point, so I'm just going to jump right into it. I'd like to start by highlighting something I have in common with my opposition, a deeply rooted desire to protect our youth from irreversible and lifelong harm. The Trevor Project noted an up to 72% national increase in suicide attempts in a survey of over 61,000 trans children. Not depression, not suicidal ideation, suicide attempts. And why is this? The study found a direct causal relationship between this trend and the enactment of anti-trans laws across the nation. The state and my opposition choose to focus on a different lifelong risk. They claim they want to prevent the alleged pain associated with detransition of trans minors later in adulthood. The Journal of Clinical Endocrinology published the largest study to look at detransition rates in America and found that it is rare and widely misunderstood. In a sample of over 27,000 people who had received gender transition care, only 8% had ever detransitioned, which is approximately 2,200 people. This phenomenon was not the result of people regretting gender-affirming care received as a minor, nor was it the result of people changing their minds later about being trans. Rather, the study found that almost every person surveyed who detransitioned did so because of pressure from a parent, discrimination, or difficulty finding employment. Of these people, a vast majority of them reported overcoming these outward pressures and retransitioned again. The study went on to find that the true regret rate of gender-affirming care in America is 0.4%. The average regret rate for all surgery is around 14%. So should we start banning other procedures that a small fraction of the population regrets? If so, I suggest we start, ironically enough, with one of the most common forms of gender-affirming care for cisgender people, plastic surgery, which has regret rates ranging from 30 to 40%. Additionally, extensive research has demonstrated that gender-affirming care has critical benefits. A study published by the American Medical Association found that teens who had access to hormones and puberty blockers over the course of a year demonstrated a 60% lower chance of depression and 73% lower chance of self-harm or suicidal thoughts than those who did not have access to the same care. The Pediatrics Journal demonstrated similar findings when it published work by Harvard Medical School researchers in 2020 that was the result of a sample of over 20,000 trans adults. The sample asked whether the individual had taken puberty blockers as a teenager, and if not, would they have wanted to. Results demonstrated that those who did not take puberty blockers as a teen demonstrated lower rates. Results demonstrated that those who did take puberty blockers as a teen demonstrated lower rates of lifelong suicidality. Similarly, a 2021 study conducted by the Trevor Project of over 5,000 trans minors found that minors who have access to gender-affirming care demonstrated statistically significant lower rates of depression and suicidality than minors who desired gender-affirming care but were denied access. I am not arguing that trans kids should be able to get whatever treatment they want whenever they want. What I am here to tell you is that gender-affirming care is similarly situated in terms of risks and research to other types of care we already permit minors to undergo regularly. Tennessee, the home state of the Scrimeti ban, already permits many procedures for minors with significantly worse risks. The state permits the use of growth hormones to treat idiopathic short stature, including potential risks of cancer and hemorrhagic stroke. It permits the use of mood stabilizers to treat minors with bipolar disorder, including potential risks of menstrual abnormalities, infertility, osteoporosis, obesity, and reductions in bone mineral density. And it permits the use of antidepressants with potential risks of increased suicidality and sexual dysfunction. Despite these risks, the state still chose to leave the decision about care to the child, parents, and medical experts, which leads me to ask, why has the state singled out trans children? My opposition tells you that we should not trust the medical community despite its overwhelming consensus that gender-affirming care is good. Why? Because these professionals profit off of providing gender-affirming care. Or because the medical community has been wrong before, so we should never trust it again. If your doctor told you that you had cancer, would you denounce them as profit-hungry and refuse treatment? Better yet, how would you feel if you accepted their recommendation but were told no by the state because it thinks your doctor is profit-hungry? As lawyers and law students, we are better situated than most to empathize with the plight of medical experts here. What are we if not professionals seeking to use our specialized expertise to help people? Do we want our clients suddenly mistrusting us simply because we profit from their services or lawyers have been wrong before? No, of course not, and I urge you to trust doctors who have sworn an oath, much like us, to advocate the best they can for their patient. Against the advice of medical experts, my opposition argues that this issue should be left to the state legislature. They caution against judicial and federal interference, but this is in direct opposition to the intentions of our founding fathers. In Federalist 10, James Madison touted the ability of the federal government's enlightened views and virtuous sentiments to render inferior the local prejudices and schemes of injustice of the states. Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 78 further asserted the role of the federal judiciary is to protect the minority from the majority, and further said that the courts of justice are to be considered as the bulwarks of a limited constitution against legislative encroachment. Even still, the state would disagree with these founding fathers and instead posit that this function falls squarely on the shoulders of the legislature. What would happen if we did leave this matter to the legislature and cautioned against judicial interference? What other laws would this give way for? If we permit the state now to enact a law that forces trans people to live with gendered bodies they do not want, what will stop the state from enacting legislation in the future forcing anyone to do this? You might think, but the risks of gender-affirming care make it unique and susceptible to regulation. But as we've already laid out, these risks are similarly situated to other forms of permitted care already taken by minors. Could the state pass a law that prohibits breast reductions for cisgender girls because it's unfeminine? Could it pass a law requiring girls to maintain high-pitched voices and boys to maintain low-pitched voices? What about a law that requires girls' bodies to look feminine and boys' bodies to look masculine? You may think these laws are obviously unconstitutional, but for many trans people now, they are a reality. This ban forces trans kids to live with gender traits that align with their sex assigned at birth, and there is nothing preventing the state from forcing this conformity onto cisgender kids too. You cannot take solace in thinking that they will stop with trans kids, or even trans adults, nor should you, because our constitutional doctrine protects everyone, not just cis people, from laws enforcing gender roles and norms. As Judge Floyd opined in Grimm versus Gloucester County School Board, a Fourth Circuit equal protection case about an anti-trans bathroom policy, how shallow a promise of equal protection that would not protect trans youth from the fantastical fears and unfounded prejudices of their adult community. It is time to move forward. The realistic impact of a ban like this is not that trans minors will patiently wait until they are 18 to resume treatment. These families will instead be forced to leave the state periodically to receive care elsewhere or flee permanently. And this is no mere concern or hypothetical. It is already happening now. LW, the trans teen plaintiff to Skermetti, and her family scrambled to find an out-of-state physician and had to travel 5 hours to North Carolina to get one. LW herself said, "It would be horrible for me to have to continue to go out of state to get care. I feel normal now." Even this was short-lived, as North Carolina banned gender-affirming care shortly after. So I pose that difficult decision to you tonight. If your child was trans, would you feel comfortable living in a state that has communicated it does not welcome trans minors, that invaded your private sphere of family decision and made medical choices about your child for you, that revoked care your child had been receiving for years, care that you watched bring your child back to life, made them smile again, made them, as LW say, feel normal like everyone else. I started this conversation tonight with a discussion about suicide because, quite frankly, the data is abysmal and demonstrative of a dire need for change. But why should children have to be suicidal to get the care that they, their parents, their therapists, and their doctors agree is necessary, and that their cis peers are already receiving? My opponents and I agree on several things. We want to put the proper guardrails in place to protect trans kids. We want to prevent lifelong irreversible injury to minors. But a blanket ban on this care does not do that, and that is why I urge you to vote no to the proposition.